This week's podcast episode was originally broadcast in November 2025 during our Social Talent Live webinar. If you missed this free event when it was broadcasted live, be sure to sign up for the next one over on socialtalent.com/live.
So let's dive into our first panel. So we're going to talk about defining and establishing TA ops to set us up. And I'm incredibly pleased to welcome our first guest, Molly Sly. You might have heard Molly on the podcast talk about this topic over the summer. If you haven't, do check out that episode. You'll find it on Spotify or Apple. But Molly is here to provide that crucial foundational perspective, drawing on her experience supporting a large global function with a small but mighty operational team at Sage. Molly, thank you so much for joining us here on ST Live.
Hi, Johnny. Thank you for having me. And I love that you said small but mighty team, because I think our team is pretty mighty as well.
I would 100% agree. Mighty and punching well above its weight. And I'm keen to dig into why is that? I think you're a big part of that. So maybe, Molly, if you don't mind, for most of us on the call have a TA ops function, but maybe we don't all agree what the heck it is, right? Mm-hmm. So would you mind maybe sharing a little bit about how you would define TA ops? Because I know in your team it's not called TA ops, for example, right? So what is it called in your organization? Maybe where did it come from? And what are the core functions that you support?
Okay, so for our team, we're a global TA enablement team. And I think what I've seen, especially by talking to more operations folks, is it seems like there's a delineation between a rec ops team and enablement, which I wasn't aware of before. But I think that TA ops is just the two of those teams combined, really. So rec ops in general, I think they focus more on like infrastructure, systems, process, maybe data. Whereas I think most people think of enablement as being training, content, process efficiencies, like making sure the recruiters have everything they need to really excel. And so I think TA ops is really those two functions combined, and it can be different things for different companies. But I would say that for us, we don't have a rec ops team. So our enablement team really is a TA operations team. We handle anything that is not filling of requisitions. So, process efficiencies, adoption of our tech tools. I think technology is not always the number one answer, but making sure that you're utilizing the tech you have to its fullest. Making sure everything's scalable, forecasting, just really any program that is not to do with filling roles falls on our team. So that would be my definition of it and what it is for us. And I've already forgotten the second part of your question.
That's all right, but you said small but mighty. So maybe what is the size of your team, and then how many recruiters are you supporting? What does that look like?
Okay, so there are three of us. Myself, Haley, who's our program manager, and she runs a lot of the programs, onboarding, referral programs, pretty much anything new that comes up that we want to change or enhance. And then Sylvia on the team is our analytics guru. She's more of our analyst, and she has really given us line of sight to so much data that we didn't have before, and so many insights that we didn't have before. So the three of us essentially support the entire TA organizations, but in terms of business as usual recruiters, we have 35 right now. That's not including our early careers team, of which I think we have 5 or 6 over there. So three of us, 35 taps, recruiters. Those recruiters are across 6 countries. And I think we, on a regular basis, we're probably recruiting and filling roles in between 13 and 16 different countries.
So talk to me about the time before TA ops. Maybe, if you can remember back, what was the catalyst to organizing this function? Because just to be clear, while 75% of our audience here today have a TA ops function of some description, not every team does. It's not, and probably 10, 15 years ago, nobody had this function. So where did it come about, or how did it come about within Sage?
So it's a great question. And back when they put this team together, I was managing a team of recruiters, product and tech recruiters. So I was not in the room. I didn't know these discussions were happening. I was just thrilled that they happened. So obviously our leadership team, Sarah Jackson's our VP of TA, our leadership team saw the need for, as we all know, everyone's being asked to do more with less, and budgets and teams are shrinking. So you can't just keep doing that if there's no one to facilitate making sure that the tech is running the way it should, making sure that the products are doing what they need to do, that the process is as efficient as possible. So the powers that be, thankfully, determined that there was a need for this. And with the same time that they rolled out this team for us, we were also moving. We were doing a lot of change, but probably the biggest change was that we were moving to a global structure. So now we were going to be moving teams around, and you were going to have recruiters recruiting for a function, regardless of what role or what country that role sat in. So there was a lot for us to do right from the get-go. But I think for the same reason that many companies do it or need to do it is because your recruiters need support. They don't have the time to stop and figure out why a process is taking so long. So they just kind of suffer through it because no one has the time to stop and say, wait, can we change this?
But there probably was, as you said, the catalyst maybe was this transformation or change of the org structure that probably created, an event that was not business as usual, where someone needed to take over essentially a project, but that project then became a full-time role and eventually a function. How many years ago was that, Molly, just to kind of give us a sense?
Actually, 2 years ago this month. So it was November of, 23. So yeah, we're having a birthday.
Wow, happy birthday to the team. It's my youngest boy's, Ethan's, 7th birthday today. So we've got lots of birthdays going on here. So yeah, I'm not seeing him today because I'm on the other side of the world, but I'll hopefully see him on Saturday morning when I get back. So when you think about, your team, right? People don't decide to just set up a TA ops function willy-nilly. There has to be an ROI to take 1, let alone 3 recruiters off recs and have them do non-recruiting, right? Because we kind of think about, well, why isn't everyone just filling the recs? And, if we're busy, and I know your team has really been busy the last year or so in terms of scaling as the Sage business has grown as well. So talk to me about kind of how you think about ROI, how you think about, justifying the team. And maybe that could help some folks on the call who don't yet have this function. Think about why would we have this? How do we measure? How do we look at it?
And it's funny that you ask, because we were so busy once we got Sylvia on the team. We wanted metrics on everything. How are the TAPs doing? Where can we create efficiencies? Where do we have gaps? Where do we have problems? And what we weren't taking the time to do was say, hey, how do we sing for our supper? Like, what are the metrics to show that our enablement team is making an impact? And so I did challenge Sylvia a couple months ago, and I said, hey, we probably need to be able to speak to this. What are we doing? How can we show that what we've done makes an impact? Because it's not just like there's not a tool that we do a lot. And a lot of it is training and things like that. So one of the things that we looked at, there's a lot of the things we looked at, but the thing that's most compelling, I would say, is that every year when the company was looking at forecasting and how many positions we were going to hire, and then the capacity and the number of recruiters we needed to deliver that, they were using the number of 54. Obviously, that number came from somewhere. We were using it several years in a row. So 54 positions to be hired by 1 recruiter per year on average. So however many roles we were going to hire for the year, you divide that by 54, and in general, that would kind of give us our numbers. So Sylvia really looked at how many have the recruiters been doing. And in the last year, we've topped at 71 hires per recruiter on average. Now, that is not a sustainable number. I want to say that. Our recruiters have absolutely been, they've been killing themselves. Like, they've been killing it and killing themselves probably in the process as well. They have really worked to deliver, even when it's almost kind of like impossible, the numbers and things that we were giving them. So absolutely hats off to our team, because they did a lot. It's not a sustainable number. So Sylvia and I looked at, well, what is a sustainable number? Definitely not 54. Certainly not 71. And so we kind of felt on 61, 62 would be good. And it still shows how much improvement and how much efficiencies and optimization has been involved, but also not at a level, not 71, where they're going to have to work, crazy hours or put everything else on hold to only fill recs.
So kind of a standard improvement of 15 to 20%, but capacity to maybe go up 40% when necessary, if supported. So what are some of the initiatives? Because you mentioned to me before, it's not one thing. You talked about training, you talked about tools, but maybe can you walk me through 2 or 3 of the biggest projects that you've been working on that you think contributed towards the ability to drive that capacity up?
Sure. I think I think the hiring manager training has been really key. So many of our hiring managers have never even had training, no matter how many years of experience they have. And so getting them on board with what is a better way to train or interview makes them more confident. Therefore, they're not going to delay and say they want to keep seeing more candidates. We're going to help them make sure they're asking the right questions, make sure they have a structured interview plan, and everyone that's interviewing is asking, assessing for different criteria. So that will speed up our hiring process, increase our quality of hire, but ultimately it gives the managers confidence to pull the trigger and not just keep shopping around, which was super frustrating, I think, for every recruiter that ever lived. So I think that has been a big impact. The other thing I think is that we've created a lot of sort of global standardization across the team, made sure that they know where to get everything they need. We have a SharePoint site where they can get absolutely everything they need, templates, so they don't have to recreate things or build things on their own. We do pretty regular training sessions with the recruiters as well. And even just making sure, when we all started, there wasn't a team like ours. Right now, if we hire a new recruiter, they go through an onboarding process and we make sure they're trained in all the things they need to be trained in. But before, when I was managing a team, everybody got trained differently. So even just some simple ways to have the ATS and their dashboard set up can really save them some massive amounts of time. And so it was us kind of sitting down with them and just trying to find those efficiencies, using Teams Premium to transcribe their interviews and help them with summaries for the hiring managers, just trying to really utilize what we have currently, but make it really much more efficient and impactful.
I love that lean approach in terms of this isn't about, well, we invested $1 million in Paradox or upgraded our workday. This is about doing the basics, as you say, enabling everyone properly across the hiring process, looking at just small things around how we set up our dashboards, how we look at our workflows. I guess this is the meat and potatoes of TA Ops, really, isn't it?
Sure. Well, and it's also the growth mindset that's so important. Obviously, your company, Social Talent, I'm a huge fan. We do have that for our recruiters, and we do ask them to do learning for themselves as well, their own development. And then I think, we've got a big project where we are, for the first time in quite a long while, bringing in a new tool. So we've gotten the LinkedIn AI hiring assistant that we are just onboarding. And so for us as a team, as you all know, you can't just throw recruiters a new tool. They don't have time to stop. So we really have to entrench ourselves in it and make sure that we're going to make it as easy for them to utilize as possible, and drive some training and really watch that ROI and the adoption of it all, because I do think it can be a huge time savings, but we have to be able to use it right. If they go in and use it once or twice and it doesn't work for them, then they're never going to touch it again. So it's our team that tries to figure out how can we make that more useful? How can we show them that it actually could help them if they try it maybe a different way?
I have a great question here for one of our audience members, Ian Perlman. Do your ops team colleagues have prior recruiting experience? If yes, no, how much does that matter in your world?
So for our team of 3, Sylvia and I both came up recruiting paths. I then moved on into recruiting, leading recruiting teams. But yes, we are both recruiters. Sylvia has always been within the TA org, but never a recruiter. I think for TA ops and or enablement teams, I personally think that being a recruiter is important, because how do you train recruiters if you've never been one? You don't understand the pain points, things like that. But I think what I'm finding is a lot of rec ops professionals and rec ops leaders were never recruiters. They were maybe more on the technology side or recruiting coordination, things like that. But I feel like if you're involved in enablement, any kind of training, creating content, again, how do you know what they need if you haven't had to use it yourself at one time? So for our team right now, we're a bit of a mix.
We're really getting into the detail here with some of our audience questions, if you don't mind taking some of them. But this is a theme, a couple of questions on it. I'm going to pick this one here in terms of any data protection discussions regarding the use of Teams Premium and the transcription function, because for this listener's team, they're not allowed to use transcription. So yeah, a lot of mixed opinions on whether you can or can't do that and how you handle consent, etc.
Yeah, and that one we did run by our legal team, because to everyone's point, we do have to be careful about anything AI related. So what the legal team said was, don't use the recording function, because that's an option, and then you could have the video. But also, if we're sending video interviews to their hiring managers, they're not really, there's possibility for bias. They're also
Mm.
like, why are you letting me watch you do your job? You're supposed to make my job easier. So we did check with the legal team. They said it's fine to use transcription as long as we make sure that we tell every candidate, hey, Johnny, I would love to turn on the transcription function. I'm still going to be taking some notes, but I want to be more invested in what you're saying. I want to dial in, and that way I can get a summary at the end. Are you fine with that? And as long as they say yes, then we are good to go. We've covered our grounds there, and that, like I said, was coming from our legal team. So that's what we've been doing. If someone was to say, can I have the notes, then I would send them the notes. I mean, that was a conversation between me and them, and they might even have access to it after the fact. I'm not sure. But you just have to clearly make sure that they know that you're going to turn that on and that they agree to it.
Love that. A couple other questions coming up around, a few questions actually around your SharePoint site. So how do you drive the discipline in finding the tools and resources on the SharePoint site?
So that's a great question. I really felt like at the beginning I needed to just have a tattoo on my forehead that said it's in the SharePoint, because people were like, Molly, I can't find this thing in the SharePoint. Hey, where's this? It's in the SharePoint. And so I think just they probably got sick of us saying it. Anytime there was a meeting that we shared anything, we'd say, oh, and here it is in the SharePoint. And we would always bring up the SharePoint. It was like overkill, probably. I'm sure they want to shoot me every time they hear it. However, because they say you have to hear something 7 times before it really clicks. Sylvia, when she was trying to help me come up with statistics to show that our team is doing a good job, looked at the SharePoint data, and we were getting, I think, 800 monthly visits to the SharePoint. And so she was able to put it together. They spend 2.5 minutes on the SharePoint each time. We figured out, okay, well, that maybe saves them 5 to 10 minutes for whatever it is they went there to get. And so it came up to something like 4 hours of time savings for our team per month. Or maybe it was 4 hours per recruiter. I don't have that right up in front of me, but my point is they're using the SharePoint now. So after hearing it just kind of over and over, that's where they're going. And if somebody was to go to you and say, Johnny, where's that thing? I would hope that Johnny, I think they all started, it's probably on the SharePoint. It's on the SharePoint. So we did put a lot of time and effort into making that SharePoint. It's just a link repository, clearly defined titles. That's the document you're looking for. So we put a lot of time and effort into it, but they're using it. So
I love that.
If you build it, they will come.
We have so many of your peers answering really lovely specific questions in the chat that I told you we run out of time fast, Molly.
Okay.
We're out of time on that. I'd love if you have some time when you're off camera to join in the chat. We've a ton of questions from our audience, which is fantastic and testament to the detail you're bringing here and what you're doing as a team. But Molly, thank you so much for joining, sharing some of some of your story. I think that's a really good segment to establish the foundational value of TA Ops, right? And I love particularly your focus on trying to measure this and your example of obviously driving that 54 average up to 70, 71, even though I take your point, maybe that's not sustainable, but somewhere in the middle is right. And it's doing it by being creative, not saying we just bought some tech tool, right? You're driving the processes, the enablement, the hiring, not just looking at the recruiters, but looking at the team. I think that that's exactly what TA Ops can do and deliver, and the value that we can bring to a scaling TA organization. Molly, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.